and welcome back to my channel. For today's video, we're going to be talking about book recommendations based off of characters' professions. Alrighty, for our first category, we're going to be talking about librarians. So our first book for that category is going to be Funny Story by Emily Henry. In this story, we're following Daphne. She's recently given up everything and she's moved to her fiance's hometown in Waiting Bay, Michigan. And everything is going great until the night of his bachelor party when he realizes he's actually in love with his childhood best friend, Petra. And he dumps Daphne, and that suddenly leaves her with nothing. She has no home, no friends, no support, just her dream job of being a children's librarian. And so, needing somewhere to live, she finds one of the only people who could truly understand how crummy her situation is, Petra's ex-boyfriend Miles, who was also dumped the night of the bachelor's party. The second book for this category is Things We Left Behind by Lucy Score. So this is the third book in the Knock 'Em Out series. And in this book, we're finally finding out the backstory of the feud between Sloane and Lucien. Sloane is the small town's librarian, and Lucien is now this CEO billionaire, but he grew up in Knock 'Em Out next door to Sloane. And this is one that you definitely want to read the first two books to fully understand the entire story, but it's definitely worth it. Alrighty, our second category is bodyguards. So for our first book for that category, we have Twisted Games by Anna Huang. This is the second book in the Twisted series. In this one, we have Rise Larson and Princess Bridget von Oshberg, I believe is how you pronounce it. Rise, he's been a bodyguard for a long time, and he has never had a client who's been as infuriating as Princess Bridget. But somewhere along the way, she manages to work her way under his skin, and he's willing to do anything to be with her. Things get extra complicated when Bridget's brother actually gives up the throne, making her the next in line. And now that adds on a bunch of extra pressure of having to rule a country that she never actually wanted to rule. Alrighty, our second book is Practice Makes Perfect by Sarah Adams. This is the second book in the When in Rome series, and this is actually a great segue because our next category is going to be florists. And so in this book, our hero, Will Griffin, is a bodyguard, and our heroine, Annie Walker, is a florist. Annie's looking for her happily ever after, but she's just absolutely lost in the dating world. Will is suddenly back in town because his client is going to be in town for a while because she's actually marrying Annie's brother. One thing leads to another, and suddenly Will finds himself coaching Annie on how to date, because pretending never turns into anything real, right? Alrighty, so our second book for the florist category is King of Greed by Anna Huang. This is the third book in the King of Sin series. In this book, we're following Alessandra. She's been a faithful trophy wife for years. She's watched her husband Dominic build his empire, and she's tired of being on the sidelines, and she's wanting to figure out who she is. And so she decides to make the hard choice of going to leave her husband. What she didn't expect was for her husband to actually fight to save their marriage. Alrighty, our next category is construction. So I don't actually have a copy of this book, but we're going to be talking about The Match by Sarah Adams. In this book, we're following Evie. She works for Southern Service Paws, which is a company that matches people with service animals. And she received an email from a man named Jacob. He's a local business owner. He owns a local construction company, and he has a daughter who was recently diagnosed with epilepsy. And the email is a bit odd, but she'll never say no to a consultation. So she goes, and things don't exactly go the way her normal consultations go. Super cute book. Alrighty, our next book for this category is Love Redesigned by Lauren Asher. In this book, we're following Dahlia, who's nursing a broken heart and dealing with some mental health struggles. And so she's come back home to Lake Wisteria to figure out what she's doing with her life, figure out what's going to happen next because her interior design show was canceled. Meanwhile, Julian has continued to live in Lake Wisteria since childhood, and he's actually taken over his late father's construction company, and he's brought it up to be a major success. Julian's mother is best friends with Dahlia's mother, and so Dahlia's mother ends up telling Julian's mom how Dahlia's really struggling, and Julian's mom ends up asking him if he can kind of take Dahlia under his wing, help her just get out of this funk that she's been in. The only problem is Julian might end up falling in love with her in the process. For our next category, we're going to be talking about personal assistance, and our first book for this category is Terms and Conditions by Lauren Asher. Both Declan and his siblings have been given tasks that they each have to complete in order to receive their inheritance from their grandfather, who is actually the founder of Dreamland. This is kind of like a Disneyland situation, so imagine if Walt Disney had grandsons. Declan's task is to get married and start a family. Declan has no interest at all in love. He has interest in working and becoming the CEO. So he tasks his assistant with finding someone who is willing to marry him for the allotted amount of time that the will states and to have a child with him. Declan is a bit of a grump, and he keeps scaring off every single person that Iris can find who is willing to fill this role. And so in a last minute, split second choice, Iris decides to volunteer. What could ever go wrong? Alrighty, our next book in this category is Assistant to the Villain by Hannah Nicole Mayer, and this one, it's a bit outside of my usual reading style, but it was a really fun read. And so in this book, we're following Evie Sage. She's the main provider for her family, and she needs a new job as soon as possible. After a series of odd events, she finds herself with a job offer from Ren Dawn's infamous villain. While working for him, she can't help but develop a little bit of a crush on her new boss, and she also can't help but wonder if he truly is the bad guy. Okie dokie, our next category is bakers. So for our first book, we're going to be talking about When in Rome by Sarah Adams. Noah Walker is a baker in Rome, Kentucky, and he's living his nice, quiet life when all of a sudden a woman appears in the form of a broken down car in his front yard. That woman is actually Princess of Pop, Ray Rose, whose name is actually Amelia, and she's on the run from her life due to a serious case of burnout. Noah knows it's never a good idea to get involved with someone who's just passing through town, but he can't help but notice their connection. And Amelia can't really help but fall in love with this small town. Alrighty, our next book for this category is Mixed Signals by B.K. Borison. This is the third book in the Lovelight Farms series, and this one we're following Layla. She is the owner of the bakehouse at Lovelight Farms, and she's really struggling with love. She feels like she's never going to find the one. She feels like she's just doomed to watch everyone around her find their happily ever after. Except for one day, randomly, Caleb, who's the ex-deputy, but is now high school Spanish teacher, proposed an idea. 1 month, no strings attached. They're going to practice date each other, and they're going to give each other tips, figure out what they're doing wrong, kind of prep each other for finding the loves of their lives. Only problem is, the more they pretend, the less it feels fake. Alrighty, our next category, one of my favorites, is authors. So the first book we're going to talk about here is Beach Read by Emily Henry. This story features January Andrews. She is a best-selling romance author. She's really struggling with her life view after losing her father, and she's suffering from a really serious case of writer's block. She's spending the summer in a beach house, and she ends up finding out that her next door neighbor is Augustus Everett, another author who she has a little bit of history with. He's also struggling with a pretty bad case of writer's block. One night they make a deal. Augustus is going to write something that has a happily ever after, and January is going to write something that isn't a rom-com. I feel like the best way to describe part of this book is the last line at the back of the book, which says, "Everyone will finish a book and no one will fall in love." Really. Such a cute story. The next book we're going to talk about is Verity by Colleen Hoover. I feel like most people have definitely heard about this book, and either they love it or they hate it, and I kind of love it. So we're following Lowen. She's an author. She's really struggling, and she suddenly gets an offer to continue writing a series that is a really popular series, but the original author, due to a tragic injury, is no longer able to finish the series, but the publisher wants to finish that contract. And so Lowen is hired because her writing style is kind of similar, and so she ends up moving into Verity Crawford's house to go through her office, look through the notes, to kind of gather what Verity was thinking for the rest of the series. When Lowen's in Verity's office, she finds a horrifying autobiography that really changes how Lowen feels and thinks about the situation that she has gotten herself into. Alrighty, the last book we're going to talk about for this category is The Fiction Writer by Gillian Cantor. In the story, we're following Olivia Fitzgerald, and she is going through it, dealing with a terrible case of writer's block after the heartbreaking failure of her previous novel. She also just got dumped by her boyfriend of 9 years. She's suddenly living alone for the first time in a long time, and she's so relieved when her agent calls not for another update about her non-existent next novel, but with a job offer for a ghostwriting gig. And that's how Olivia finds herself attempting to interview People's Sexiest Man Alive and billionaire Henry Asherwood III. But every time she tries to get him to focus on the book and do the interviews, she's just hypnotized by his presence. And when she tries to start doing some research on her own, the more and more things just don't add up, and she's starting to wonder if taking this job was a mistake. Alrighty, our next category is going to be the medical field. I didn't want to be too specific about doctor, so we're going to just kind of say the medical field. For our first book in this category, we're going to be talking about Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez. Dr. Brianna Ortiz feels like her life is falling apart. Her brother is in dire need of a kidney, no one she knows is a match. Her divorce was just finalized, and she has a sneaking suspicion that the promotion that she's been dreaming about is going to go to the new male doctor, Jacob Maddox. Except suddenly, Brianna's whole perspective about Jacob is shifted when he writes her a letter. Alrighty, second book we're going to talk about in this category is Protecting What's Mine by Lucy Score. This is the third book in the Benevolence series, and I feel like you don't necessarily have to read the first two, but it will help if you do. We're following flight trauma surgeon Mackenzie Mac O'Neill, and she's facing some serious burnout. So to whip herself back into shape, she finds a temp job as a family physician in a small town. This will be the perfect change of pace for her to really just gather her bearings and get back ready to go back to it. Only problem is her new next door neighbor, who's also the fire chief, is incredibly distracting. Alrighty, final book we're going to be talking about for the video, I actually don't have a copy of because I read it on my Kindle, was The Inmate by Frida McFadden. After the death of her parents, Brooke has moved her and her son back to her hometown, and she's taken a job as a nurse practitioner in a men's maximum security prison. It's going okay, but Brooke is keeping a secret. One of the inmates there is they're serving his life sentence due to Brooke's testimony. Alrighty, thank you so much for watching. This is so fun to do. Definitely still a little nerve-wracking, but it's been really fun doing these videos, and I'm really excited for all the things I have coming out next year. My plan is to continue posting 2 videos a month, so please subscribe, make sure you don't miss any of the videos. Comment what other videos you'd like to see in the new year. I have a lot of things already planned, but I'd love to get more ideas about what you guys actually want to see. And yeah, so happy new year, and we'll see you in January. Bye.